All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the WatchWell Podcast. My name is Parker, and this is my co-host, Nick. We review movies through the lens of truth, and Nick is already smiling. What's this smirk, Nick?
I'm just ready to go.
You ready to go?
Yeah, it's been a while since we've done an episode, so I'm ready.
Yeah. We need to ask for forgiveness and repent of our sins for not posting. We said that we were going to post twice in that 1 week, but things just got super hectic, and everything out of my mouth at this point is just an excuse. But we're back and we are ready to go. We're super pumped.
Just because it's an excuse doesn't mean it's not true, though.
That's very there you go. I like it. We'll go with it. We told you guys that we were going to be reviewing King Richard in lieu of all of the publicity Will Smith has gotten.
Yeah, he's been in the news a little bit.
Just a little. His felonious activities, assaulting comedians and things. Nick, should we start off just talking about that a little bit?
I don't really know. I mean, what thought do you have any thoughts that you feel add
I do.
To what's already been said?
And I'm sure people have heard this before, but I don't know if you've heard, Nick. Have you heard about the round table with him and Jada a few years back where she admitted to the word she used was entanglement?
Yeah, I know I know very little, but I know the gist.
Okay, so it's this round table. It's this stupid thing they do where they talk to each other about life and, in my opinion, say things that are way over profound than they really are, and kind of proves that Hollywood's lost its grip on reality, which I'm sure a lot of people have, come to realize recently, and I would say in the near recent future or past. What would that be? 5, 10 something years, 15 years. And I can't remember. I'm kind of blanking on the name of the other celebrity actor, whoever he is.
Austin. I think it was a musician. I don't know the name.
That's his name. His name's August.
Okay.
It just hit me out of left field. His name's August, and she admitted to having a entanglement with August. And pretty much the episode boils down to her telling Will on live YouTube, whatever that was, whatever streaming service, that she is cheating on him. She's made him a cuckold man and is stepping out on their marriage. And I guess my opinions of what happened with him and Chris Rock at the Oscars. That's right, Oscars.
Yeah, it was the Oscars.
Was just his loss of grip on reality and dealing with a wife that is not faithful. And as a man, that's going to boil up and you're just going to snap at some point. So I think what we can learn through the lens of truth is, how important it is, whether you believe in marriage, whether you believe in monogamy. It just shows how important that really is, that, you keep the marriage bed pure, and God designed marriage and sex for a man and a woman. And marriage is the vehicle that makes it holy and stays within his design. So I think a lot of that goes to prove that,
So you think you look at it as all being like all of that stuff is related to what happened at the Oscars.
I tend to think that, yes. Yeah. I don't think that, because if you watch the video, it was Will Smith laughing. So Chris Rock said the joke about G.I. Jane towards Jada, and after
Will giggles.
right after Chris Rock said the punchline, the camera cut to Will and he was laughing, and then you saw Jada roll her eyes, and then the camera cuts back to Chris, and you can infer that Will looked at Jada, saw her disgust, and then stands up and walks on stage and assaults Chris. So it just shows that, there's just a lot, any one of us normal people, us peasants, that would do something like that, we would go to jail. We'd be paying fines. We'd be sued. There'd be criminal charges. and we definitely wouldn't be winning an award you know, later the evening that we completed that. So that action. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
I don't know. I try not to assume too much. I don't know exactly what's going on in everyone, like especially, you know, celebrities' lives or anything like that. So I know a little bit about the entanglement thing, and actually this is going to be kind of related to the episode today, but I saw a brief clip on Father's Day one year it was in the last couple of years, and it was from the same show, but it was Will talking about being a father.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually thought it was really good.
Okay.
Like some of the
I'm
stuff that he's coming out.
clip,
but that's really, I mean, so there's other things that I've heard from them that are like way out there, like things about not disciplining children and just things like that. And
yeah, I mean, they've been in the news,
but
sorry, go ahead.
So I mean, but all of that to say also that I have no idea what's going on in their lives. Right. And yeah. You know, you could come in objectively say, yeah, it was a crime, you know, somebody would usually be arrested, but I try not to think about, you know, what might have motivated it, or how might it connect to other things that are in public knowledge, just because I don't know that stuff and I don't know what goes behind closed doors. It sounds like, you know, that for a time they were, meaning Jada and Will were separated, and there was a whole lot that went on during that time. But I mean, I have no absolutely, and nor do I want to know. I have no idea what their marriage is like, other than what's public, you know.
Yeah, which
and
that's kind of,
which is a lot. Which is a lot. Yeah, or at least there's stories out there that are public, some of which they've said themselves, others are just rumor and, you know, right, people making assumptions. But yeah, I mean, with any celebrity, there's going to be a lot out there, and there's going to be a lot of private stuff that should be private that gets, you know, blown up. And
yeah, I mean, I think your point is valid, that, you know, don't feel like you don't know what you don't know, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really truly know unless you're behind the doors.
Yeah.
Closed doors.
So basically, I guess just from where I sit, all I really know for sure is that one guy told a joke, another guy got mad. You know, even though he laughed first, I saw that part of the clip. Even though he laughed first, another guy got mad and reacted, and that's really all I saw.
Yeah, but you don't think that them coming out saying that they have an open marriage and that she's sleeping with other, you know, it just seems so hypocritical, from the point where, like, keep my wife's name out your mouth, but you can keep my wife in your bed as long as you want. Like, you don't think that wears on him?
I don't know.
Because I mean, that is some of the information that came straight from their mouths, is like
anything I would say about that would just be me making an assumption. I mean, I can make an assumption all I want, but it's still just an assumption. Like, I don't know. I don't know what they think. I mean, the reality is not that it's healthy by any means, and not that it should be like, not sure that it should be recommended. There's probably millions of open marriages.
Oh yeah. I mean,
and they don't all result in somebody assaulting somebody else.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think that there's got to be something that happens to the soul, though, right? You know, I mean, sexual immorality or sinning.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not talking about there not being some type of detriment when that's the case. All I'm trying to say is I don't know either of them.
Right. And I think your position is legitimate. I was just trying to, I guess I am in the world of assumption a little bit, but I don't know if it's necessarily wrong to assume that harming your body and your soul directly correlates to improper actions at the wrong time.
Right. But it might not correlate to every improper action.
Probably, you know, I agree with that.
So like to the I mean, obviously, you know, sin breeds more sin.
Right.
And so it's very much possible that everything is connected.
Right.
But it's also possible that they're completely disconnected. They're just two separate instances of somebody acting out in sin.
Right. Do you think that there's any weight to being an actor for so long that you just always act? You just kind of lose your identity because you're so many other people. Do you
Possibly.
think, I mean, I know we're still assuming a little bit to your point. But I know you hear of actors like Heath Ledger, who played the Joker, who did really, really well, but then, commits suicide, and they link it, or at least they try to link it to, how psychotic the character was, and they blame it all on that. Do you think that maybe as an actor, you lose pieces of yourself the more people you play and the more money you have, and you just kind of lose grip on what's real?
I think that's possible. I guess I can't really say how deep that might go,
Okay.
but it's definitely possible. But I think more of what happens is, when you are used to receiving a certain type of praise, when you're and you're used to having a squeaky clean good guy type image, which is what Will Smith had for a really, really long time. And along with that, for a long time, every single movie he touched was an automatic hit, like just right, millions of people
After Wild Wild West, right?
Right. So, or just with the exception, I mean, dating back to the 90s all the way up through like probably ended right after I Am Legend, but and that was what, 2008, 2009, somewhere around there. But then all of a sudden, he's not getting the critical acclaim that he used to get, and he's not getting the box office success like the movie we're talking about today, King Richard. He got awards, but the box office was terrible.
Right.
Like people just didn't go see it. And then eventually it made its way to HBO Max. But
well, that's interesting that you bring that up. I wonder if that's what happened to me, because I went to Apple Movies, like on the Apple TV that I have, and I tried to rent it a week ago. When I went to watch it, you could rent it for like $6 or something like that. You could rent it for like $5 or $6, and then you could actually buy the movie for like $10. Well, I went today, as you know, and tried to rent it, and it wasn't even an option to rent, and it cost $20 to buy the movie. Yeah. So, and then obviously you let me log into your HBO Max thing, and I watched it, but I don't know. I just think it's all interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know really how everything connects, but I mean, like Will, you're used to a certain level of praise, you're used to a certain level of popularity, a certain, in a lot of ways he's always been kind of untouchable. And I guess I more so than the acting aspect of things and getting lost in characters and things like that, I think when that starts to degrade a little bit, that's probably hard to take.
Yeah, and I think that, I 100% agree with that. Do you think that would have more an effect on your behavior than like having an open marriage and your wife cheating? And I know we're back to speculating again.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't
you're
know.
Not gonna
see, this is the thing.
I'm not gonna engage.
I don't really feel the need to have a take on everything, and it's just I don't know, and I'm fine with that. I'm not gonna look into it. I'm not gonna research.
There you go. Hey,
I just don't know.
Man of conviction, we'll call it. Okay, cool. So let's get into this movie. Motion picture rating, MPAA. So it's rated PG-13 for some violence, strong language, sexual reference, and brief drug use. Common Sense Media is age 13 and up, and then Plugged In Movie Reviews rates it heavy for kids, medium for teens, light for adults. Obviously, it was released last year, 2021, and then the setting year is in the 1990s. The movie,
early 90s, right? I think most of it's in the early. Yeah, early 90s.
Set around, let's see, Venus and Serena Williams are the daughters. King Richard is their father, Richard Williams. He is training them to become future tennis stars. As we know, Venus and Serena, we know who they are. The character names: Richard Williams is King Richard, played by Will Smith. Venus Williams, Serena Williams, and other family members and tennis trainers are the characters. I think below here we go further into the character name.
So what did you so with the plugged in and common sense, so 13 plus, PG-13, heavy for kids, medium for light, what do you think would be the cutoff age?
The cutoff age?
Yeah. If how old would a kid need to be for you to let them watch it? It's not that they would want to. I don't know how many kids are interested in biopics, but
it's interesting because it's kind of hard for me to choose. I think so I'll just say this, to start. Maybe you disagree, maybe you don't. I was actually impressed with, Hollywood is so woke these days, and they just shove it down our throats in our media and entertainment. And a lot of times I feel convicted not to watch certain movies with certain people and actors and, the people who, or the companies that budget and, raise the money and endorse the films, just because of all of the woke leftist ideology that's out there. I was actually kind of shocked that this movie, when I watched it, I didn't feel like they were doing that in this movie. I felt like it was very, very to the times, very well done. Kind of back to what you were saying about Will Smith being critically acclaimed, and everything he touched back then turned to gold. And I don't know. I think that he's just really good at what he does. Like, he's very, very good.
Yeah.
At acting.
And this movie is no exception. He was really good.
Like, he deserved that award. He did really well. On his acting. Yes, on his acting alone, he deserved the award. I thought that it was the Oscars did something right. So I would have to say that I'd be okay sticking to what these ratings say. I think they're okay. I think 13 is good. There's a sexual reference, one of the thugs in the movie. There's that reference that, I don't have to say, but it's, that might go over a 13-year-old kid's head, and maybe 13-year-old kids know what that is today anyway. So I think I'd stick to it. I think it'd be okay.
Yeah.
13.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I would be comfortable actually with maybe even a little bit younger, depending on the kid, really. But
maturity is huge. Yeah.
And as long as, with watching with a parent, just because of that reference that's in there. And I mean, there's no nudity. There's not, and I might just be misremembering. It says strong language, but I don't remember a lot of strong language.
I think there's the use of the N-word, and I think that any use of that is probably going to get that strong language rating. But other than that, I don't remember a blatant F-bomb. I don't remember, maybe some dams and hells. Other than that, I don't remember a whole lot either.
Yeah, I don't. So yeah, I mean, I think it's from that perspective. Yeah, I'm comfortable with the ratings as they're given. Maybe, a little bit younger depending on the kid. Right. And the reality is, I don't know that most kids, unless they really love tennis, maybe they're Serena and Venus Williams fans, which I don't even know how really popular they are in tennis anymore. But if they're tennis players or have aspirations of being tennis, then maybe this movie would be something they'd be interested in. But I don't see a lot of kids being interested. What about you?
No, not at all.
Yeah,
they're bored out of their minds by the second scene.
Yeah, it's definitely a grown up, like targeted towards grown ups.
It's really a more, it's not as good. Don't get me wrong. It's not as good as Remember the Titans, but it kind of reminds me of that without any of the action scenes, without any of the football. It's like one of those inspiring, critically acclaimed kind of, I guess, genre, for lack of a better word. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I could watch Remember the Titans over and over and over again because it's about football, and it's just really great. Yeah. This movie I could watch maybe I'd be probably good not watching it again for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. I would say the Will Smith's acting is really what sets it apart. It's not really the story. It's not really the movie itself. It's, if I were to watch it again, it's because I'm watching to see Will Smith's performance, not necessarily the story.
Yeah, I do think yeah, I'd have to agree. Yeah. I kind of relate it to 7 pounds. I don't know
Okay.
if you would agree with that. I'm not going to watch 7 pounds because it's about a dude that commits suicide because of the sins of his past and, what he's done. I'm not going to watch that movie because I love the movie and I love the story. I'm going to
Yeah.
watch it because Will Smith is amazing in it.
Yeah.
So,
Fair enough. Yeah. I see that a lot. And so one other thing that I wanted to bring up just before we get into a lot of this other stuff is, so I see a lot of overlap, very different direction, but I see a lot of overlap with the first movie we reviewed, Fences, like in terms of talking about a father.
100%.
And this is like everything that we said about Troy, Denzel Washington's character in Fences. This character is the opposite.
180 degree
Yep.
Difference. Yep.
So if you haven't watched it's labeled as episode 2, but it's the first movie we reviewed, Fences. You should go back and watch that, and you'll see it, and you'll get a comparison.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you brought that up. That's really good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So usually you do this, but I'll jump start off with going through some of the characters. So Will Smith plays Richard Williams, and he's the protagonist. He's the main character, father of Venus and Serena Williams, and the whole movie is about how he is working absolutely tirelessly to ensure that his daughters become professional tennis players, and not just professional tennis players, at least in the movie. And it's hard to know how much actually happened versus how much was embellished for the sake of it being a movie. But he doesn't just want them to be professional tennis players. He wants them to be the absolute best, the best of all time. His 2 daughters, the greatest tennis players ever. And that's what he is working towards. And that is, and it references over and over again in the movie that this is his plan, right? It references the plan that he wrote down.
Was it 78 pages?
Yeah. So I was actually just reading that. It said, the official plot, or the official synopsis says he's armed with a clear vision and a brazen 78-page plan. So yeah, this 78-page plan that he has. So he's trying to bring his plan to fruition. I thought that was kind of interesting because it never indicates that Venus and Serena didn't want to become tennis players, but it also never really indicates they had an option.
Right.
Did you notice that?
I did. But I can relate to that a lot because I think that, so I agree with that. It didn't really say one way or the other, or explore the options of them not and how those conversations went. I think that as a parent raising kids in sports, it's important to get them into a sport that you realize your kid is good at, and then foster that talent. But you have to couple that with the ability to let go and let your kid make a decision for themselves at some point.
Yeah.
And I think that Richard would have done that if one of the girls came to him and said, I don't want to play tennis or something like that. At least the type of guy and how much he loved his family, I think it depicts that he would have allowed them to make that decision. But
it definitely comes off that way.
Tennis, so
yeah, I mean, yeah. So and I hope I didn't imply that. It doesn't imply at all that, Venus and Serena hated what they were doing and didn't want to be doing it.
You were clear.
But it never shows you, it never gives you a moment where they're where they're coming to their dad saying, I want to play tennis. or I want to be a tennis player. It's just what they are. Like it's just right from the very start of the movie. That's just who they are. They're just tennis players.
Right.
And there's never a moment where they're not anymore.
So I have a question for you, and maybe this is too deep, and you can tell me if we should wait to talk about this a little bit later. But how much of, because the odds are definitely stacked against them, right? I mean, if anybody else said, even Richard was looked at as like a crazy dude.
Yeah.
Like not only, like, I think one of the lines in the film was, one of the tennis coaches later in the film was like, I think you've got the next Michael Jordan. And he says, no, I've got the next two.
Yeah.
So at what point is it dumb luck? And at what point does dumb luck turn into legitimate prophecy over your children's lives?
Yeah.
Do you think, coupled that with, they don't worship, I don't think that they worship the same Jesus that, the Bible talks about. So, do you have any thoughts on any of that? I don't mean to catch you off guard with a deep, question, but
so here's the thing. I can only talk about the way the movie portrays it, because I don't know.
Right.
Excuse me. Was that even something he ever said? Like, we don't know that for sure, right? We don't know.
Right.
We don't know how detailed the actual 78-page plan is. Did they overemphasize that for the sake of story or for the sake of the drama of the movie? We don't know. But based on the way that, if the movie portrays it accurately, then, I mean, it's obvious that the plan that he had determined the direction of everything. The plan that he put together determined the direction of everything. And he was confident, 100% confident at all times that his daughters were going to fulfill this, right? He was completely sure, and he didn't seem to ever waver in that. And he constantly went back to the fact, I wrote it down. I wrote this down, so this is going to happen.
Yeah.
As if that's something that, and that's just ridiculous. I mean, that's not true. I mean, that's writing something down doesn't make something happen, doesn't bring it to fruition. I wouldn't call it prophecy, an actual prophecy, or telling the future about what's going to happen. I would say that it shows the value of knowing where you're going. It shows the value of having a clear path and knowing exactly what your end game is.
From a leadership perspective.
That just because a leader brings about a certain result, regardless of the odds stacked against them or how unlikely that result was, just because they were confident, a long time ago that it was going to come to fruition doesn't make them a prophet.
Right.
It means they had a plan that they followed and they mapped it out to the best of their ability and followed it. Right. And they did whatever they could to bring that to fruition. And I think more so than any type of, so the Williams family, and I don't know what they are now or if this is still true or not, but at the time when they were growing up, when the Williams sisters were growing up, the family was Jehovah's Witness.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there's a couple references in the movie, nothing really prominent by any means, but there's references to Kingdom Hall. That's a reference to basically Jehovah's Witness church, essentially. And there's a lot of references to the hall. But outside of that, there's nothing. They don't reference it in the movie.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but King Richard Williams prayed for a meal, I believe, and he prayed to Jehovah God. Is that a?
Yeah, that's not. That's pretty tame.
Okay.
Because we would call God Jehovah as well.
We would, yeah. I didn't know if that was a specific.
It's pretty tame. I mean, I don't know enough about Jehovah's Witness to know if that's like indicative of them, like if that's something that they just do. But so I don't know enough, so I can't really say if that's the case. But to me, it didn't come off like it was an overt reference to Jehovah's Witness.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
I like it.
So anyway, yeah. So I wouldn't say it was like any type of plan, and I've got some more to say about that in a little bit. I wouldn't say it's any type of prophecy or any type of being able to tell the future, or nothing like writing it down didn't bring it to pass. I mean, that's like
Right.
the
I mean,
kind of
it took
thing that
work and it took planning
took
and it took
work.
making the good
Yeah,
decisions that they made.
and it
And
took Venus and Serena being 100% on board too.
yes.
Because if at any point they weren't on board, then those all day training sessions at the park that's in awful condition wouldn't have happened.
Right.
Right. So they had to be on board too.
Right.
So Richard, he is the dad training Venus and Serena, trying to, and the whole movie is about how he's bringing his plan to fruition. And then we have Venus and Serena Williams. We don't really need to go into them much, because you probably, if you've watched this movie, you probably know who they are. Venus, at one point for a very long time, was the number one tennis player in the world, and then Serena eventually overtook Venus as the number one tennis player in the world. And then we have their mom.
And it's good to note that it's I think if I remember the end of the movie, I think it was 5 times that Venus won Wimbledon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Serena won it like 25 times or something crazy.
I don't know the number. 25 seems like a lot, because
it does. But I remember,
so it's a high number.
It's a really, but they started when they were what, 14?
They were young.
So I don't remember the exact number, but it was. I remember reading it and be like, man, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I like the one-liners. I like the way that they wrote the one-liners where at the end King Richard was talking to Serena, who had been in Venus's shadow for so long that was just itching at the bit to get her spotlight. And he said, I did it. We did it this way for a reason.
Yeah.
And am I going too fast, or should we?
No, you're good. Keep going.
Okay.
You're good.
And I like the one-liners where he was like, I knew you were a fighter, and I knew that you'd be able to handle it. And there is no doubt that your sister, meaning Venus, is going to be the number one tennis player in the world. Mm-hmm. But then he said, do you want in on the secret? You're going to be the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
And so I think that, and that even came true. So, she went down as one of the, if not the greatest women's tennis player ever.
See, I remember when I was in probably college, maybe late in high school and all throughout college, it was like Serena and Venus Williams were winning absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Like they were, if Venus didn't win, Serena won, and if Serena didn't win, Venus won. And then it seemed like they were also dominating doubles tournaments.
Right.
Like when I was watching SportsCenter, back when I watched SportsCenter, they were always winning. It was always the finals, and they were always winning. But I think Serena's definitely kind of viewed as higher ranked than Venus at this point. I think Serena is viewed as probably viewed as the greatest of all time, whereas Venus is more so one of the greats. Like she's more like one of the greats, but Serena's viewed as the
and I would say that of the greats, she's at the top.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And that's another thing I would like to know if that was actually said. The thing that you mentioned,
I would too. I would. Yeah.
Because that's another one of those things. Like anytime there's a piece of dialogue like that, even if the movie's based on a true story, you have no way of knowing if it was actually said,
right? Or
did some writer somewhere add this to that scene to make it more impactful?
Right.
Like you just never know. And it'd be nice to know if that was
100%. I agree.
Yeah. If that actually happened. So far we've had Richard, Venus, Serena, and then we have their mom. And I don't know how to pronounce their mom's first name, but it also in parentheses says Brandy. So I don't remember her ever being called Brandy.
I think it's Oracene, but I could be way off.
So she's Richard's wife in the movie, and at this point in time in the Williams' lives, I guess. And she's Venus and Serena's mother, and she has other daughters. And so something I don't remember them actually pointing out in the movie is in that household, Venus and Serena are Richard's only biological daughters.
That's how I took it.
So the others are his stepdaughters.
Correct.
Did they say that though?
So I
found
remember
that out
the scene.
afterwards.
I remember the scene when when Richard and is it Brandy? What is it? Brandy?
Or
Brandy Price. Orsine. I think that they were fighting in the kitchen, and he said, "Everything that I've done, you are everything because of me. Where would you be without me?" And he said you'd be alone with those 3 girls.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that meant I took them in.
The other 3 girls. Yeah.
The other 3 girls that aren't his, in quotes, with the whole adoption thing. But I think that that led me to believe that the 3 weren't his, and then Venus and Serena were his with her.
Yeah.
And he was taking his kids to superstardom. I mean,
yeah. And that's true. That's exactly the way it is. I just couldn't remember if they said it in the movie or not. And then so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I didn't read enough to know the whole story, but it's also true that he had children with another woman that apparently, at least what I read was that that he was not a part of their lives though,
which is super interesting.
Yeah, and so obviously the movie doesn't touch on that at all in any way. No. So I read about that when I was doing some research after the fact, but yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that it's really interesting that like when you write a movie for it to be consumable for people and to be the feel-good story, because I'm sure that the way that they wrote the movie was through the eyes of Venus and Serena and how they love their dad and how they appreciate and honor their dad and all of that. So none of that other stuff that had nothing to do with them in terms of his other children wouldn't have been written in there.
Yeah.
And it would have been through the eyes of that. So I still think that there's some legitimacy through the way that it was written, in terms of like when he was talking to Venus when they were deciding whether they were going to let her play in the junior leagues.
Mm-hmm.
And she wanted to play, and she went to her coach to have him talk to her dad. And, he just, I don't know, just how much he loved those girls.
Yeah.
You would have thought that would have extended to his other kids, but none of that matters. It doesn't take away
for the story.
Not for the story. It doesn't matter. So,
because even if he failed there, he at least it seems like he succeeded pretty big time in Venus and Serena's lives, and even in his stepdaughter's lives.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like.
And who knows what happened with those other kids and the relationship with the moms
I didn't do. So he actually, so another thing I wanted to mention, Richard and then Orsine, Brandy, which I'm guessing she goes by Brandy. I don't know why it would have Brandy in parentheses if she doesn't, but they were divorced in 2001.
Okay.
So this is probably at the height of Venus's career and just before Serena takes off into superstardom.
Okay.
And so that's when they were so Venus and Serena's mom divorced Richard in 2001.
Which is also interesting with the dialogue of that fight in the kitchen where she was like, I answer to God and he's the only reason why I stay with you.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe let's get into talking about, I don't want to take over if you're going to a certain point.
Nope. Just going through that.
Let's talk about the importance of being or like, what is marriage? Like, what's the point of marriage in terms of raising kids? Like, I think that we see pretty clearly, even through this movie, that being unified, a unified front, and how vital that is on raising children.
Mm-hmm.
I guess a divided house can't stand. So,
yeah,
I think that the movie did a really good job showing that, Richard was definitely leading, and the wife, Brandy, had her own opinions, did just as much for those girls as Richard did. in terms of, Richard was off with Venus, and mom stayed back to continue to train Serena throughout.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool
awesome
turn
like,
of
that was
events
so
there.
cool.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have worked without them being a team, them being
Right.
Richard and Brandy.
And that even speaks to it speaks to both of them, really. Their mom's willingness to just jump in wherever needed and do whatever is necessary, because she also believed in the plan.
She did.
Right. She was 100% on board with what Richard was trying to make happen.
Right.
So she was willing to jump in wherever possible, whatever her role in that plan was. She was going to do it well.
And I think also, like, I've referenced that scene in the kitchen where they were arguing. I don't know if I think that they did a good job. I don't think that was disunity. I thought that did a good job depicting when there's a different line that was crossed, and how I think the Bible refers to wives as azer kenegdo, meaning, and maybe you can help me with this, Nick, but I've heard it before, where it's not just a helper, it's more of like someone who comes through when you desperately need it. And I think that definition was seen really, really well, depicted really, really well in that argument in the kitchen, because it wasn't about the girls at that point. It was Richard's fears. It was him not being enough. And that was and she was helping him through that, like, let them go, or I can't remember exactly the dialogue, but I think that it was pivotal in her character development to show that she was after the girls, but then she was also really good at balancing how devoted and how intense Richard was on this plan, and how stubborn he was about this plan, which is a strength and a weakness in its own regard.
Yeah, for sure.
Those aren't just negative qualities in Richard's character.
Yeah,
I think that it did a good job balancing that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I have any much to add to that. That was really good.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. One of my favorite scenes, so moving on with the characters, one of my favorite scenes was the scene where the tennis trainer from Florida, his name is Rick Maki?
Something.
Yeah. He came to California from Florida to the Williams home, and he was there. He's going to, pitch his training services as the one that Venus and Serena should be enrolled into. And so Richard is basically negotiating what that's going to look like. Do you know what scene I'm talking about?
Yep.
And like the way he negotiates, I don't think anyone could win a negotiation with him. I don't think it's possible. Man. Like,
it's so bizarre.
And so if he is actually anything like that in real life, it's no wonder that, Venus and Serena made it to the point where they are. Because
okay. Let's talk about this, because he's only as good as negotiator as his daughters are tennis players.
Fair enough. That's true.
So he
exactly
believed,
right,
and he knew. So I guess, well, this is a good conversation here, because it shows the importance of parents being so much in their children's lives, not as a hindrance, but to know who their children are and to know their strengths and weaknesses. And and you can only parent, coach, teach, whatever, unless you know those types of people, the levels of maturity, how they learn, what their strengths and weaknesses are, like I said. And he knew his daughters. He knew them. He knew who they were. He knew that they were on board. He knew how they played tennis. He knew that Serena was a fighter. He knew that, I'm sorry, did I say Venus or did I say Serena?
You said Serena.
Yeah, Serena. And Venus was the one that was, like he said multiple times in the video or in the movie, Venus is going to be the one that's going to open the door, and Serena is going to be the one that takes over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a little scared, because he went into the whole story where he touched the white man when he was trying to give him money, and his dad ran off, and he was dealing with all that kind of fear and stuff. I think that, and I know that
that was really I don't want to stop your train of thought, but that was a really powerful scene too, because he said that, he was getting beat up or whatever, and he saw his dad basically running away.
Right.
And he said, I didn't want you to ever look up and see me running away.
Right.
And that is huge.
It's huge
because kids should never see their dad running away.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And I think that, and that little fight where he saw his dad run away is nothing compared to the fight that he thought that his daughter was going to have to take on.
Yeah.
Because she was the first African-American tennis player to that level of stardom, right? Or was it first African-American tennis player ever?
Oh, I don't know about that. I'm
not sure. I think it was to that level.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know the history. I don't know. I don't remember what the movie said.
I really don't know. I don't think the movie made a claim one way or the other, but definitely a lot of similarities to Tiger Woods in golf.
Yeah. The only reason why I thought maybe they inferred that is because he said that she was not only winning for herself, she was winning for every other black little girl.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe it was more of
there hadn't been anyone to reach the level of success that they were striving for at the time, that they were hoping to achieve. But I don't know enough about professional tennis history, I guess, to know where they stand in terms of like that timeline.
Right.
Like, I don't know who the Jackie Robinson of professional tennis would be.
I don't know either. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that knowing your kids is important, and I think that it's definitely in today's times. I don't necessarily know. This kind of goes with it as well. When the neighbor, the crazy, grumpy neighbor, called CPS on him.
Mm-hmm.
How true was that scene? Where he was like, you need to arrest those other parents at the junior leagues or whatever league they were in at that time. And it's so, like, I saw that at baseball and like playing baseball at a high level when I was younger. And sometimes the parents are more competitive than the kids, and it can be devastating for a kid to hear that they're not good enough because they can't hit a ball, they can't catch a ball. I understand demanding excellence from your kid and playing to win and not just getting a participation trophy. All those things are good. But at the end of the day, no differently than King Richard said, she's 14 years old.
Yeah.
She's going to be a kid. Go to Disneyland, have some fun. There should be no rush to grow up.
Right.
You should not lose those years.
Yeah.
So demand excellence. Yeah. But remember who you're demanding excellence from.
Yeah.
Is what is the takeaway.
Yeah. Yeah. He definitely, it was a very real contrast with the other parents, the other tennis parents, where he was constantly asking if they were having fun.
Right.
And he was concerned with whether or not they were having fun, and he wanted to make sure they were, and he didn't want them to be consumed. He wanted them to be great. He wanted his plan to happen, but he didn't want them to be consumed with just trying to succeed all the time.
Right. And I think the best way to state it is, don't lose the love of the game, whatever game it is, for the greatness that the game can bring you, I guess. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of times where it's not fun, in some of those practices. It's just not. It's not fun. It's a job.
Yeah.
You get into college sports and it's a job. It's not a lot of fun. But if you can do it in a way to where you can continue to nurture that fun and be great at the same time, then, apparently you become the greatest tennis player of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't reach that level unless you love it.
Right.
It's just not possible. I don't,
Not
maybe someone has, I don't know, but it just doesn't seem like it's possible. Maybe,
it's also possible to not reach it and still love it that much.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
I'm just saying, in order to get to that level,
Right.
there has
100%.
to be both.
You have to have both.
So another thing, did you notice that Richard Williams hosted a version of the WatchWell podcast in his living room?
I did.
What were your thoughts on that?
I loved it. I thought it was a great teaching lesson. I loved, I wouldn't leave my kids at a gas station, but I loved how hard he was and intense he was on teaching his kids lessons, because he wanted them to stick. And I thought the movie idea, my favorite one, I think it was actually my favorite part of the movie, where he was like, all right, we're going to watch the movie again because nobody gave me the right answer.
Right. Yeah. And so they just watched it again.
So then I think,
and then he even there was one of the girls, I can't remember which one. I don't know if it was Venus Serena or if it was one of the other three, but got sent to her room because she wasn't taking it seriously or something.
Yeah.
And then when he said, all right, we're going to watch it again, he called her back out to the living room and she had to watch it again too.
So I think it's funny that, I don't know, I thought that was good comedic humor, but I also think that it's the power of the father, and when you have buy-in from a spouse, the power of the marriage really shines. And I don't know. I loved the movie for that aspect where it was father and mom working together for the betterment of the children.
Yeah.
Now I think that to a little bit of a degree, well, no, maybe I can't even say that, because he was very much on value-based character. He was very much, school character, don't forget who you are kind of person. But then outside of that, we're going to be great, and we're going to be the greatest tennis players ever. And I think that's missed. I think it's so hard to do anymore because kids, now everyone's doing what Venus and Serena did, from just a general big overarching sports aspect.
All the travel sports.
You're on nationally ranked teams when you're 6 these days. So
it's insane.
It's nuts. It's stupid. And but that's what it takes, unless you are just a Michael Jordan, or a LeBron James, or
apparently unless you have a dad like Richard Williams.
Right. So
So I guess along with that as well, and we keep coming back to this, so I hope it's not too repetitive for people listening, but the movie really is about, it's the movie, the main character is Richard. Yeah. And it is the whole story is about the importance of a father.
Yep.
To guide and direct his children in a specific direction. And it obviously uses tennis as that direction, and it uses Richard's plan as that because that's their experience, but it doesn't have to be that. Fathers should be directing and guiding their children on a path.
Yep.
And it shows, when we did the Sing episode, you were upset about,
I was,
the men not being
I hated it.
Strong characters,
and I hated it. I hated it not because they're. And you brought up a good point in that episode where there is a sense of realism because that's what men do, and that's true. But I hated it because you want good role models for your kids to look up to when they consume entertainment or when they have characters that they like. You want them to look up to and to emulate those types of characters, and in that movie, there just wasn't. And for it to be a kid movie, set Hollywood agenda aside, it should be in kid movies, if anywhere. And so that was my big beef on that movie. So the movie was completely the opposite. It was a good father directing his kids, emphasis on character and knowing who you are and being independent and all of those great things that you should teach your kids.
Yeah. So one thing I walked away with from this movie is that regardless of any type of agenda that Hollywood might have, and probably not everyone in Hollywood, but the people who are deciding what projects get made and all of that stuff for certain. And regardless of how culture seems to be shifting, I think this movie proves that everyone still knows and understands the importance of men.
You mean like to their core?
Yeah.
Whether they say it or not?
Yeah. Meaning the fact that this movie could be made and Richard Williams can be shown in a positive light means that our society and culture still deep down know the necessity of good men and the necessity of good fathers, regardless of how.
I would hope so.
So because for a long time, and depending on where you go, the talking point was as toxic masculinity. Right. And so for a long time, we've taught boys that in order to be good grown-ups,
they have to be women.
They have to be more like women.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's more even like more extreme versions of that now, but it was more so, in the past, it was just more so be more feminine in your character. And
right.
no one would ever say that. No one would ever use those words, but it was be a quiet to your, like, follow the rules, don't be too rambunctious, don't get rowdy. And that's just not what a guy is. And Richard Williams is not, he doesn't follow the rules. He breaks every single rule possible in order to get his daughters what they need and what he thinks will help them. Like, right. It doesn't matter what rule is there or what the normal way of doing things is. He's just breaking down the door and gonna make it happen. Right. So the fact that can happen and be shown in a positive light means that whether they recognize it or not, Hollywood and culture as a whole still understand the value of a strong man.
So I'm going to use your words against you here for a second, because at the beginning of the podcast, you said that you don't want to make assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an assumption?
No.
How is that not an assumption when they're depicting someone who was? I think it would be different if it was just a made up story and they made it that way. I don't think Hollywood would have made that story. But because it was someone who actually did those things, and they, I think it's just chalked up to, well, that's what he did, so we're going to depict him as he was. But they wouldn't write a new story with a father figure that was like that.
Would they not?
I don't think they would. Is there a movie that you can think of that is in recent, like within the last 2 or 3 years, that is that?
Oh, I mean, I wasn't prepared for that question, but I don't know. Because I can't even think of another movie at all off the top of my head at the moment. Like, it doesn't whether they have a father in it or not. I know of many TV shows, and maybe that's the difference with with good fathers in the movie.
And I'm also speculating as well.
Yeah, but so I guess more so what I'm trying to say is not necessarily that Hollywood set out to make a movie with a good father. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
What I'm saying is, in their effort to meet their agenda in other ways, what they actually did was tell everyone they still know that men are necessary.
Or at least the movie itself shows the positive impact that a man fulfilling his image does.
Right.
At the very least. I can agree with that.
So I think there's probably a lot of negative things that are just as real and happened just as much as the positive things that they showed in this movie. There's probably a lot of negative experiences that the Williams had that didn't make it into the movie. Right. There's probably a lot of flaws that Richard Williams has that didn't make it into the movie. Right? Mm-hmm. So if Hollywood was completely motivated by this agenda, then those things would have been there.
Right.
Because they happen too, I'm sure. And maybe that's an assumption, but they had to.
I think it's a better point. Yeah. I think that depicting, I think that's solid.
Yeah. And you can go, so the movie that just popped into my head, it's maybe it doesn't count because I think it was 2013, and that was Man of Steel.
The Superman.
So Superman movie,
Yeah,
has two really strong fathers.
Yeah, you're right.
So I mean, maybe that's more to your point though, because I had to go back to 2013 in my head to think of one, but that's what popped into my head, and there might be more that I think of after we're done talking. But
right, that's usually how it happens. We get off
yeah.
the podcast, and then we're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we have all these great thoughts.
But so I guess my point is just that in a society that is moving away from men, as moving away from strong men as the foundation and the leaders in their family, this movie gives us a picture of all of the good that comes when men are that.
I agree, 100% agree with that.
So yeah.
Yep.
Maybe I should have just said that and left it there.
Yep.
And didn't go into.
Yeah. No. I think that I just think that when you get into the motive of Hollywood, it gets a little sticky. But I think if you get to the core of the movie itself, it demonstrates the power of a father in that role, regardless of the time that it's in.
Yeah.
So I can agree with that for sure.
Yep. So, so obviously this was a true story, and we're trying to watch this movie through the lens of truth. And this is the first movie that we've done based on a true story. So, Parker, do you have any thoughts on if reviewing true stories in the way that we're doing versus reviewing fiction stories, if there's a difference? Do you see any difference?
No, I don't, because I think truth is truth and it's objective. So it doesn't matter. So if something's made up, usually it's manufactured emotion, I guess, if for lack of a better way to say it. I think true stories we relate to on a more realistic level. But I don't think that using scripture to pull out the teachings of like the Bible and the Christian faith, I don't think any of that changes regardless of whether it's fiction or nonfiction in the story itself.
Yep.
I guess I would ask you, Nick, do you think that I mean, the parables that Jesus told, were they fiction? So I guess that would prove the point, right?
Yeah. So they were stories. So
he made up stories to tell to get people to relate to truth.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what, we are building this podcast on. So
Yep. And then so to take that even a little bit of a step further is all of reality, everything that happens in history is part of the story that God is authoring. So Richard Williams' story is one subplot in this grand, massive story that God has been authoring for thousands of years, that he has been creating and putting on the page, or putting on the screen, if you will. God has been authoring and directing a story throughout all of history, and every true story, everything that happens. So I have a story, you have a story, my neighbor has a story, and all of them are being weaved and authored by God. And so when even if a story is true, whether it's true or fiction, there is truth that we can pull out of that takes us back to something about God. It doesn't mean that every story that happens is on purpose communicating something true about God, on purpose directing us there. But regardless of the intentions of the person writing it or the person crafting it, just the fact that they're crafting a story means that in their nature, they're reflecting God's nature, because God is a storyteller. God is an author of stories, and all of us are proof of that. And when we write stories, whether they're fiction or true, we're just doing what God has already been doing for years.
Well, yeah, to your point is we're made in his image, and he is the creator. Therefore, our image is to create.
Yeah.
And that's why being God and worshiping ourselves is such an easy sin to commit, because it's the enemy, Satan, playing on that creator string because we are in his image and we want to be like God. I mean, it goes back to Genesis and the fall, the first sin, and Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So, yeah, I think, that's well said.
Yep. All right. So, anything else you want to say about the movie or add before we get into some deeper things, some Bible stuff?
I was gonna say something, but I forgot.
Forgot what it was.
Yeah, I did. We were talking about. Bummer. It had something to do with sin, but I can't remember. Maybe if we start reading Romans 8 and all that stuff that we had planned, it'll come back to me.
Maybe it'll come back to you.
What was your last main point?
God's storytelling, basically, and our storytelling just being a reflection of that.
I remember now. Thanks. It was whether the story itself is fact or fiction, the sin that happens in the stories is all the same.
Mm-hmm.
The sin, there's no different sin. Sin is sin, and it's been the same sins committed since Genesis. So I think that kind of helps prove our point as well, where it doesn't matter what story it is, you can boil it down to a sinful nature or a righteous nature. It doesn't matter if the story's made up or not.
Yeah.
So that was another point that I was going to make.
Yeah.
A little sub point.
All right. So the Bible verses I picked are coming from the whole perspective of Richard Williams having a plan and having everything always comes back to this plan. And when he's confronted with, how have you been able to do this? How can this be happening? How have you been so successful? I think there's a couple times in the movie where he talks about how he wrote down the plan. And then there's one moment, actually, let me go here first.
Okay.
But what that shows is, so here's Richard Williams planning all of this out as a father. It shows that mankind has a longing for a father with a plan. Does this make are you tracking with me?
I'm tracking. I'm just trying to.
Okay. So mankind, the reason that this story resonates is all the hoops that Richard Williams is willing to jump through, everything that he's willing to sacrifice. I think at one point it showed him that he was, working nights and then during the day training with the girls and, not sleeping a lot and all of that. And the fact it shows all of this in an extremely positive light and the positive impact that a father with a plan has.
Yeah.
He was bringing to fruition this plan that he had. And then, so in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, this is in the story of Joseph. So, just not to assume that everyone knows exactly what I'm talking about here. Joseph was sold by his siblings into slavery. He was sold to Egypt, and he was taken into Egypt, and he was sold into slavery. And because he was sold, because they were jealous of the fact that he was their father's favorite child, and their father was not
child.
Yeah, was not shy about that. And Joseph was the favorite child, and so his siblings were jealous, and they sold him into slavery. And then they told their dad that he was dead. And so after all of that takes place, Joseph eventually rises up the ranks in Egypt, and he's not a slave anymore, and he's second in command. And there's a famine everywhere. There's a famine, and Joseph's brothers, who are Israel, come to Joseph asking for help, not knowing that Joseph is their brother. not knowing that the person that they're requesting this help from is second in command.
They were asking for food, right? They wanted to buy food.
Yep. They wanted food because of the famine. And so all of that plays out. And then we come to a point where they realize who Joseph actually is. And so they come to this moment where Joseph has forgiven them. Joseph has let that go. He has let it go. But it comes to this verse in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. It says, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." So that's a verse that gets read a lot. And there's a popular worship song that says what the enemy meant for evil, you turned it for good. There's a popular worship song that has that in the verse. But that's not quite what this is actually saying. This isn't quite that something took place and then God saw that take place and then decided, I'm going to make that a good thing. That's not what this is saying. When it says that as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. When it says meant, it's a word about intention. It's at the same time, his siblings had intentions of evil coming to Joseph. They had intention of evil coming to Joseph, meaning slavery or death. They had intentions of harming Joseph. And it was their intent. But at the exact same time, in the exact same moment, and even before Joseph's siblings ever had any intent, God also had intent to use that exact same event for good. So when it says that as for you, meaning the siblings, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about that many people should be kept alive today. God, just as the siblings planned to harm Joseph, God planned to use the siblings' plan to harm Joseph before they ever had the plan to harm Joseph, for Joseph's good and for the good of his people.
Mm-hmm.
So God has a plan in place that he is bringing about, and there's no amount of evil intentions. There's no amount of evil doing. Elsewhere in Romans 9 talks about God raising Pharaoh up, that God's glory might be known through Pharaoh's evil actions, basically, through his denying freedom to Israel. So through all of that, God has a plan that he is bringing about, and no amount of evil intentions on man can stop his plan from coming to pass. So who is this father with a plan that we want? Who is this father with a plan that whether we admit it or not, whether people admit it or not, when they watch a movie like King Richard, and they see this father who's going to great lengths to ensure that his plan comes to fruition, well, we have that. And it's God, the creator, who has a plan that he's doing everything to bring to fruition. And nothing can hinder his plan from coming about. Any thoughts?
Nope. I think you summed it up pretty well. I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. I think it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I got nothing. That was pretty good, man.
Good. And so just some other verses about God having a plan, and God bringing things about. So in Romans chapter 8, verse 28 through 30, it says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified, and those whom he justified, he also glorified. This signifies the certainty with God, right? There's not a category of people that were predestined but not glorified. There's not a category of people that were called but not predestined, right? God has a very specific plan, and he's in the details. God is in the details, and he is the one working everything to come to pass for his glory and for the good of his people. And that's a theme throughout all of Scripture. And then, again, one verse here.
So you're throwing the word predestined around a lot.
Well, I didn't throw it around. I read it out of the Bible.
Yeah, but the Bible also talks about free will, and I don't know if
can you find so we can get into that. It talks about choice. Little bit. It does talk about choice.
It definitely uses choice. And how do you? So, in this conversation, I'll just talk about my own hangups. So, the decision. Okay. So let's talk about the decision, the conscious decision to say, I'm going to die to myself. So the Bible says, come and die to yourself, follow Jesus. He says, follow me, right? He wants unrelentless obedience and unwavering loyalty, right? The predestination thing gets me when you start thinking about choice. And if I'm going to choose myself, if I'm going to make a decision to choose Jesus, that inherently would be a work. Wouldn't it? Would it not?
I think so. But not everyone would agree with me.
Right. Well, I tend to agree, obviously, with me. So I would think
you tend to agree with yourself.
I agree with myself often, and I think that we should get that on a shirt or somewhere. I agree with myself often. That'd be good. I think that in itself would be an action, no differently than any other action, serving homeless people or any other good work that you could do. Therefore, your salvation is partly dependent upon yourself, which is illogical in terms of how we receive our salvation.
Yeah. But at
the same time, the Bible talks about choice, and I don't have chapter and verse off the top of my head, but I do know that the Bible talks about having choice, and there's disobedience, and then you get into the whole argument of if we are totally depraved, then how did God create evil? How can something good create something evil? So then you can start getting into those.
Okay, jumping back a little bit. Yeah. So you're getting into a little bit of to throw some kind of big words on it, I guess. There's what you were addressing was something called a debate between monergism and synergism.
Okay.
All right. So monergism means mono, one. Okay. So monergism, it means that salvation is completely and only a work of God. Okay. So God alone is working things for salvation. Okay.
I tend to lean that way.
Okay. And then synergism means more than one.
Well, synergy is like harmony, working together.
Yeah. So like cooperation, basically, meaning that God with us, God with our cooperation brings about salvation. So that's where you would get to, God saves, but we have to make the decision to follow, and then God saves. So it's God working in cooperation with us.
But I don't know, man. I don't think that we have the power to do that. And I know that you agree. I'm just saying, outside of Like the logic doesn't hold up. Is that stupid to say?
Well, not to
I
me, because I agree with you. I'm not the person to debate you on this. So it's not. Yeah. So
I guess I'm just curious as to if you know the good arguments of the other side.
Well, usually the arguments. So I mean, you're right that there are warnings about falling away from the faith in Scripture. There are warnings about things like that. So the flip side to what we're talking about is if it's impossible to fall away, why would there be warnings? Right?
Right. And then also, I mean, the one argument that I've heard before is God creates man who's totally depraved. Therefore, God created something evil, inherently evil, which doesn't logically hold up. And then at the same time, because he created evil things, how could God want to send someone to hell and choose? Because now he's choosing those to save and he's choosing those to not save.
So,
and I know that the refutation of that argument is a perfect God who is perfectly just can do whatever he wants, and it's not inherently evil. So I don't know. Do you have thoughts on those? Like on those?
Well, to the first one, Adam and Eve were not totally depraved.
Correct.
So
they were deceived.
Yeah, Eve was deceived, and Adam just
how can you
went with the flow?
Right, but how can you make something that is not totally depraved that chooses sin, but it be predestined? That's the big thing, right?
I don't understand the question.
Okay, so we're talking about God creating Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Your stance is they weren't totally depraved.
Yeah.
Right? But yet they were deceived.
Well, Eve was deceived.
Eve was deceived and Adam chose passivity, right?
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile those two things without choice?
Well, I mean, they had choice.
But that's the whole point. So are you saying that choice is not mutually exclusive with Arminianism or the opposite of predestination?
Yeah. So that yeah, definitely. Yeah, choice is not the opposite of predestination. They are not opposites of each other. So Adam and Eve could have chosen multiple different routes. Okay. They potentially so for example, the Bible talks about so I could even go back to I'll go back to this in a second, but I could go back to Joseph. The fact that God had intentions for Joseph's siblings' actions does not mean that Joseph's siblings also did not choose those actions.
Yeah, but if they did, and I guess
they did exactly.
I'm arguing.
They did,
so I'm arguing.
They did exactly what they wanted. They did exactly what they wanted to.
Right, but their sin is now God's fault.
No.
How not?
They're accountable because they were acting in total depravity.
They were acting in total depravity.
They are totally depraved. So what the meaning of total depravity is that when I exercise my free will, I choose wrongly, hopelessly.
So then that gets us back to the question of how does free will?
So I have the will, but my will is in bondage, in slavery to sin. Romans 6.
Right.
Okay. Slaves. So, but thanks be to God that you who were once slaves of sin have become obedient from the heart to the standard of teaching to which you were committed, and having been set free from sin, have become slaves of righteousness.
Right.
So the contrast there isn't between slavery and freedom. Do you see that?
No, well, I'm understanding what you're saying, but for those of you, for the listeners who haven't,
We're getting way away from the
yeah,
movie on this one.
like how do you practically, to someone who has not grown up in the church, has not read the Bible often, and I know that you would urge them to do their own research and study and seek for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you practice? Because I struggle with this like a lot, actually, where I don't know how to practically explain how free will fits inside of the box of predestination.
Can you explain how it doesn't?
No, I can't explain one way or the other, which is why I get stuck. My foot is usually in the camp of our choice to follow Jesus should not have anything to do with our salvation, because then part of our salvation would be like my fault. And I don't know if that fits. I don't know if that fits the gospel. I don't know if that fits the whole purpose of Jesus. I can't save myself.
Right.
Which fits the definition of total depravity.
Right. So Arminians would agree with that statement. They just think it works out differently.
Well, I don't know what that means. Works out differently. Like, can we be more specific?
Everyone. So here's what. So I don't know. This might be helpful, and I wish I had a whiteboard or something, because when I was teaching a class on Romans, and we got to chapter 8 and chapter 9, and so on the board, I drew a line.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, and that line it's a timeline representing all of human history.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just picture a line with points on the line of specific dates, events that took place, things that happened, and then on somewhere on that line, I made a mark and I put July of the year 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And on that mark, I wrote, Nick is saved.
Okay.
And so right now, all we have is this timeline. So one view, and I don't know that this is necessarily exactly, I don't know that, there could very easily be holes in what I'm putting out right now. One view would be the Bible talks about predestination.
It does.
Right?
It's
there. You can't deny it, and we can disagree about exactly what the word means or exactly what it's referring to.
Right.
But predestination is a biblical fact, is a biblical truth. So one view of how it relates to salvation is that God looked down in the future, looked to the future, and saw that this person, this person, this person, and this person would choose him. So God predestined them for salvation. Okay, that's one view. So on our timeline, this is sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. But on the timeline, at the front of that timeline, the view that I just described would have God at the very front of the timeline. Okay, looking down it. Okay.
Well, can I throw something in there real quick? I don't want to mess up your timeline and the way that you're explaining this, but the Bible, biblically, God is time. So
what do you mean by that?
So I don't know, like, can God actually look ahead, or is he just there as well?
Well, there's nothing to really. There's
you know what I'm saying?
Right, and I think we can talk about that philosophically. I don't know if we can talk about that with certainty theologically.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay,
that's right.
So God, so that view, and even all of this is somewhat philosophical, but so in that view, God is looking down, and based on who he sees that will accept him, God chooses those for salvation. So that's a synergist view, right? Mm-hmm. These people are going to choose me, so in cooperation with that choice, I'm choosing them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So then another view would be that
which
God
is completely conditional.
Right. Yeah, conditional.
which is completely conditional.
Which is one of the 5 points of Arminianism, conditional election.
Right.
So another view would be that. So we still have our timeline. So we have one view: God is at the end of the timeline, at the beginning of the timeline, looking down it. And we have another view where God is above the entire timeline, and not just looking down it or looking around it, but working it, bringing it about,
which is the whole transcendent and immanent thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and he's like, God is the one bringing time into existence as it moves, even.
Right.
Like he holds everything together, the Bible talks about. So in him, in Colossians chapter 1, talking about the supremacy of Christ and Christ's preeminence, it talks about a lot of this kind of stuff. But then even more, to get to more specific about salvation, I think we try to focus way too much on our own free will. And the reality is that the Bible doesn't at all. The Bible doesn't focus on our free will at all in salvation. So, for example, looking at Romans 9, verse 16, and this is a whole big study that really deserves a lot more time than what we're giving it. Maybe another episode, like a special episode or something. But
that'd be fun.
Romans 9:16, after it goes through this whole big section on God hardening and Pharaoh. And
is this the
and
I don't know if so. Is this the giving over?
Nope.
Or is that in 4? I think that's earlier.
That's in 1. Yep.
Is it in 1? Okay.
Yep.
I knew it was earlier where the giving over to the
base mind.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is Romans 9:16 says, so then it, meaning salvation or God's mercy, depends not on human will or exertion.
Yeah.
But on God who has mercy.
Yeah, which just goes to show that we can't save ourselves.
Yeah. And it even doesn't depend on my will. I have a will. I have a free will. I am free to choose whatever I want. But my will, if I am in sin, is in slavery. I have no hope to choose anything other than my slavery unless God does it.
Right.
And so
that makes most logical sense to me.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean there's not complications in that view either. I mean, like you said,
right.
there's still things that are hard to explain and hard to get, but yeah, I mean,
well, and with you saying that, let's say this too, to take the pressure off. Like, none of this in terms of understanding it matters. You know what I mean? Like, you can research this to teach it. You can, to the best that you can, but I mean, your salvation doesn't depend on you knowing this.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I think that
or agreeing.
Yeah. Like, I know in Ephesians it talks about church unity, and I think a lot of times we get lost in the weeds of over theology, theologicalizing, whatever that word would be, things. I think that there's definitely value. I'm not taking pressure off of good, solid biblical doctrine, but I think that there's a point of no return, maybe. Would you agree with that? Or
I don't think I know what that means.
Well, what I'm saying is there are things that I think that the enemy can cause more damage with lack of unity in terms of things that, really don't. I don't know if they were left to be understood.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So just let it be and go carry out the actual mission that we're called to carry out. and
Yeah, I will.
dividing and being not unified
Yeah,
as much as we divide.
it shouldn't be necessarily be a point of division, but I think naturally where you fall on this will impact the way you view the mission needing to be carried out, the
I can see
methods
that a little
and
bit.
way. So like it's kind of like what we're doing with movies. We're viewing through the lens of truth. It does change your lens a little bit if you depending on where you fall on this. And
Mhm.
it's not like a matter of dividing, saying I won't work with you for the good of our community because you don't align with me on this issue. It's not like that, but it does impact. So obviously, as if I'm a preacher and I'm going, if I'm an Arminian going to a church that has a Calvinist as a preacher,
Mhm.
I might get mad when he preaches Romans 9.
Right.
Right. So there are some things that,
yeah, but my
yeah.
point is Romans 9 is still Romans 9.
Yeah.
And I think that there is equal, and maybe I'm saying this because it's never been really explained to me well, but I think that there is equal holes on both sides that don't matter, because Romans 9 is Romans 9, and then the verses that talk about choice and having a free will and all of that are those verses as well. So I think that to some degree you have to open your hands a little bit and get back to putting your trust in Jesus as a church and multiple churches, that even the unity inside the church, and just preach the word as you know it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or am I just way off?
No, I mean, I don't think you're way off. I think the main idea of what you're saying is 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 right in that, again, there shouldn't be division, but I guess I place a little more weight on these things. I place because where you fall on this will impact where you fall on other things.
I
It
mean,
will.
I could see that, but not like if you're sticking true to the words of Scripture, and I understand there's interpretation and there's different things like that, and these core things can affect other core things, but is it really that broad of a difference? Is there that big of a gap to, I guess, cannibalize ourselves as Christians in relationship with Jesus?
Well, no, not to go
Like,
that far. No,
like that's my
no,
whole point.
yeah, yeah, not at all, not at all. But
I think that happens quite a bit, where we get so theological just for theological sake, and then we get mad at things that don't really affect the main. I think we agree on, like, Christians with Christians within the Christian, for lack of a better word, bubble, agree more than they would like to admit.
maybe I'm not sure.
Outside of these, I mean, I'm just speculating, but that's just kind of, I guess, my experience, maybe.
Yeah, I guess I don't see a lot of disagreement in general anyway.
Okay.
So I don't see a lot of division anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that, like we'll call them outsiders for lack of a better word, in terms of those who don't claim to have claim to have a relationship with Jesus. But I think that, when you get into First Timothy, and when you get into, predestination and free will and Calvinism and Arminianism and all these different things, I think that there's a lot of people that believe different things, and that's the whole reason why churches separate and create new churches, and in a negative light, because they can't stay within the same church. And that's why I'm harping on the unity thing, which is taught in Ephesians again. But I don't know. I think that church separations can be both good and bad. I think that if you have a bunch of leaders who grow and they want to adopt their own community, and they, you come together, you grow, and then when you get strong in the faith, you want to separate and make more communities. And I think that if a church is dividing because of that, I think that's okay. But I think more times than not, at least from what I've seen, it's, oh, these people disagree, we're going to split for whatever reason. And I think that the reasons are kind of because of conversations like this. I don't think that they should be avoided, though. So I don't know. Those are just some of my personal experiences and thoughts. I didn't know if, like, your thoughts, but it doesn't sound like you've had the same experience.
No, I've never. When I've been a part of churches that have split or had huge rifts, it's always been for things like completely unrelated to the Bible.
Oh, wow.
So I've never experienced anything where diving into doctrine and talking about theology resulted in separation.
Oh, wow. See, I've seen churches with structures where people disagree with the structure and leave, elders leaving and relationships burned because of how some people think the structure of the church should be set up and how others think it should be set up. And they started the church together and they can't, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I think that it's more important to talk about Jesus and what he did and how he is, you know, the way, the truth, and the life. And
so I hate to harp on this, but you can't separate that from the other stuff. Like,
and maybe my
the Bible
maybe my perception is completely wrong
so the Bible from cover to cover is all the Word of God, and it's all pointing to the gospel of what Jesus did. It's all from cover to cover, it's pointing to that message. So how we interpret Romans 9 impacts how we preach that message. So we should do everything we can to, as best as we can, to interpret it correctly.
Agreed.
And we should, and there should be a specific way when we're, and again, I'm 100% in agreement that people, like, I shouldn't look at somebody and say you're not a Christian because you believe differently about predestination than I do, unless it's, you know, like something absolutely, you know, way off base. But I guess I'm just coming from the point of, so to counteract what you're saying a little bit, and this doesn't necessarily disagree with you, but I see too little depth of theology as a bigger problem than too much.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I'm just saying that let me restate for clarity. I think that churches split over dumb reasons. And I think that the Bible, I wouldn't call them holes, but I don't necessarily know if we can understand fully how God works because we just aren't him. And I think that there are churches split because of that. And maybe my perception of the churches that I've seen split over time, maybe my perception is wrong because I'm not in the back rooms and I don't, you know, behind the closed doors, I'm not seeing the truth and what goes on. So all I have to base my experience and perception on is what I observe. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, because I don't disagree with what you're saying in terms of how these things affect other things. Mm-hmm. Like you just can't make that claim because it's not true. But
so yeah, I guess I don't see how you can just like focus on Jesus. Because
I guess I am kind of cheapening it when I say that. That's not my intent. My intent is you don't need salvation, or I'm sorry, let me restate that. Like if you don't need to, I don't even know how to communicate what I'm trying to think. So I'm saying that your salvation isn't based off of your theological depth. Maybe that's a better, maybe that's a better way to say
100%. Yeah, totally. Yeah. If that's what you're saying, I can't disagree with that at all. Not even,
you know, you're not saved because you don't understand predestination and how it fits with, you know what I'm saying?
Yep. On board.
Okay. And I think that, yeah, that's just what I think. And I think that churches split because they don't agree on the weeds, but they agree on like the main points.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's just my lack of understanding at this point in time.
Yeah.
So,
and yeah, I can't deny that happens. I haven't experienced it.
Yeah.
So,
and that was the biggest tangent in the WatchWell podcast history.
Yes.
But it's fun to talk about.
Yeah.
How
long have we been going?
I don't know. I wish there was a timer so I could watch it, but there's not. So, yeah, I think that's it for the episode. We'll end it on that. Guys, check us out on Facebook. Share the page if you don't mind. We'd appreciate it. We appreciate all the support that you guys give us. Our Patreon page is up. You'll see it on the Facebook page. If you want to support us and what we're trying to do, where we use movies, watch movies, view them through the lens of truth. And we want people to have a practical way to always, see the world through their faith, teach people how to pull, biblical truths out of story constantly so that they can start to do that in their own lives and it bleeds over. So we need to take a drink. This has been a long one. So thanks for listening, guys, and we'll get you the next episode and movie information as soon as we decide. We will see you guys.
All right, thanks.